It is game time. It is game week. Welcome to HBCU Gameday. Tolly Carr along with Stephen J. Gaither as we take a look at this upcoming football season. And we're going to do a little D2 action here. And Stephen, last year, Winston-Salem State was a heavy favorite. They get to the CIAA championship game, and Virginia State, they ran plays and they practiced as well. And they pulled a bit of an upset. So that's in our rearview mirror as we look forward to this upcoming season. What is your prognosis for the CIAA? And we'll talk about the SIAC as well.
Right. First of all, thanks for having me, Tolly. It's good to be back with football starting up again. But, yeah, you talk about that the last time we were getting ready around football. It was CIAA championship game, Virginia State winning. Things have changed for both teams. For Virginia State, they lost a big loss in head coach Latrell Scott, who went down the road to Norfolk State. But they do have that loss, but they do bring a lot of talent back, starting with their quarterback, Terrion Ayers. He is, he was a key cog in their engine last year. Didn't play in the CIAA championship game, but he did lead them to a win at the playoffs against LIU Post. And so he's got another year under his belt. He's got 2 more years to go, actually. So he did a really good job last year leading that offense with his arm, with his legs a little bit. And then they've got another top CIAA talent in running back Kavon Bellamy, who is another player that had a breakout year for those guys last year. He's a workhorse running back, so he's back. There's also Javion Smallwood for Virginia State, who's probably the best returning CIAA receiver that there is. And he's just I talked to Coach Scott a couple weeks ago at Norfolk State, and he said he wished he could have brought a guy like him back with him to the FCS. So that talks about how much talent he has. So there were some losses on the defense at some of their positions there, but they've got a lot of talent coming back. And so they actually, oddly enough, they remind me of Winston-Salem State last year, because last year Winston-Salem State, they lost their Pied Piper and Connor Maynor, and it was a new day and a new coach, and so there was that adjustment. And so that's going to be the question for Virginia State. How can they replace Coach Scott? Did he leave enough pieces in the place to get them back to the championship game and into the playoffs? Then you have on the other end of that spectrum Winston-Salem State, who returns their coach in Keenis Boulware, but there's not a lot else that they are returning in the way of starters. Talked to Coach today at the press conference, and they lost 30. Boulware said they lost 30 some odd players, graduation or what have you. So, and of course, one of those guys is still, battling for an NFL job, and Phil Sims, and the other guy I talked to today, Alfie Hill, just left Eagles training camp. So there's a lot. There are big shoes to fill in Winston-Salem State, and this is probably the most unsure year that they're going into, to me, since 2010 when Connor Maynor took over for Kermit Blunt, who is now Johnson C. Smith down the road. So. It's going to be an interesting season. They just named the starter, former quarterback for Gardner Webb. So there's a lot of new pieces, and it'll be interesting to see how they fit in the puzzle and if they can get back to that championship form again. So,
do you think, Stephen, this is the year that maybe Winston finally comes back to the pack? They had a lot of resources that were in place that they benefited from coming back from Division I back to Division II after that exploratory phase. We've been a few years removed from that now. Is this the year, do you think, that the playing field is equaled maybe a little bit, so to speak?
Well, I think that, even though Winston-Salem State, there is some of that. I think even though Winston-Salem State, they lost all this talent and the coaching changes that they went through last year, they still have somewhat of an aura just because they were voted to win because with all the players missing that we talked about and all the pieces that they have to replace, they were still voted to win the CIAA. So I think there is, they have that respect built in, but I think this year, after the Virginia State thing, I think that's probably going to be something other teams are going to look at, and they're going to say, hey, we can beat that team. They're not unbeatable. They don't just lose in the playoffs; they can lose before then. So it's going to be a situation where this is going to be a pivotal year for them to see if they do fall back into the pack. Now, they do have some Division I transfers, a couple guys from Carolina, some other guys from FBS and FCS programs. So they are still getting the transfers that you need to really compete at a high level to Division II level. But like you say, time will tell as far as if they can still remain at the hunted and not becoming the hunted instead of the hunter. So.
Now, what about the rest of the CIAA? Do you see any teams there that are looking, catching your attention that might surprise you this year, that may be making a rise to the top in the rest of the conference?
I think outside of Virginia State and Winston-Salem State, you have to look at Virginia Union. Those guys had a really good first year under head coach Mark James. It's his second. He won 7 games in his first year, and really surprised people. And if it weren't for some injuries down the stretch, they may have they could have beaten Virginia State, and who knows, maybe they would have been in the CIAA champions. But ifs and buts or candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. They're not, and so Virginia Union has a lot of talent. I mean, did a story a couple weeks ago. They have some guys coming in from Louisville. They got they've got a guy who was a walk-on quarterback at Purdue. They've got some FBS level talent. Coach James has infused some new energy into that program, and so I think if there was any team outside of Virginia State and Virginia Union that I could see, being in that championship game or winning that championship, I think it's going to be Virginia Union, just because of the year they had last year, the new talent they have. There's going to be a lot of optimism up there. I mean, you see in the Joe Taylor effect, he was so dominant all those years in Hampton. He knew how to get talent and get them and mold them, and I think you're starting to see that there at Virginia Union. So it'll be the emergence of Virginia Union is going to be a storyline to watch all year.
All right, let's go a little further south. Let's go to the SIAC and Tuskegee. Does anyone have any chance of knocking off Tuskegee this year?
Well, it's one of those things where they, as dominant as they've been the last couple of years, in 2013 they didn't win the championship. They lost to Miles at the end of the year. They didn't get to play in the championship game, but they did get to go to the playoffs. So, there's, like we saw at Winston-Salem State, anyone can be beat. But those guys have, built up an arsenal. When they decided to go to the playoffs 2 years ago and forgo the Turkey Day Classic, which excuse the expression, ruffled a lot of feathers down in Alabama. But they have put. I think they've seen what Winston-Salem State did. They're trying to put together a championship run as well. And so they've been to the playoffs the last 2 years. So they have that winning aura about them. Albany State won the championship 2 years ago when they didn't win, and they almost beat. They played Tuskegee really well, so they know how to win. I think they took some losses as far as some key offensive players, and so we'll have to see in the East. But the East there is probably the weaker of the two divisions. But you also have, I think, a team to watch in the SIAC is going to be Morehouse. They had at the end of the year last year, they kind of had a little meltdown, but they had a nice little run going early in the year. And so, every year there's one team that kind of rises, at least if not from the bottom to the top, then definitely to the middle. And I think that they can be, that team that maybe, make some runs and hurt some feelings in the SIAC. So keep an eye out on the men from Morehouse, the Tigers.
All right. Look, always enjoy and appreciate your opinion, but it will all be decided on the field starting this week. Conjecture takes a backseat to X's and O's.
Right, always. I'm just glad we're actually going to get to see some action on the field and have something to talk about every week, so I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, next time we talk, Stephen, we'll be talking about that UNCP WSSU game as well as all the Week 1 games in D2. For Stephen J. Gaither, I'm Tolly Carr, HBCU Game Day.